He was born coreless. He was told by peoples that he can't become a hero. What if rejects them all and becomes the strongest alive villain on Earth? How would this change everything? Before we start, I want you guys to subscribe to my channel. Hit the like button and also share this video with your friends. It will really mean a lot to me. You can also check other what ifs in the channel. The like aim for this video is 200. Your support keeps me motivated to bring more intriguing what ifs for you guys. Now let's begin. The answer is no, I don't think you can be a hero without a quirk. The youthful Izuku Midoriya kept hearing such words in his thoughts. That wasn't what it always came down to. Power was everything in this world, you couldn't accomplish anything without it. Some people had it like Koch-chan and All Might, but others didn't like themselves. Izuku grabbed hold of All Might, and before he realized it, he was sprinting full speed down the stairs of the building he had landed on. His once-in-a-lifetime hero just closed the door on his goal. Izuku had always felt helpless, but he had never felt so helpless before. He rushed through the stairway entrance into the lobby, his legs burning and his breathing labored, until he was standing in front of the door to the flat he and his mother shared. Izuku panted as he stumbled into the flat on wobbly legs in the quietest manner possible, his shirt dripping with perspiration. Izuku removed his shoes in the foyer, snuck past his mother unseen, went to his room, and shut the door. Why do I feel so frail? He sobbed while leaning back against the door as it slowly closed. His idol, All Might memorabilia, was all around him. Even though he knew the pleased smile was really just there for him to enjoy, he couldn't bear to look at it. You take pride in your might, All Might, since you are the peace emblem. Izuku lunged forward to his desk, growled, grabbed the closest All Might figure, and threw it against the wall, as he saw it break into pieces. All Might was shattered at his feet. If I could only do that to the real All Might. As an idea began to develop in his head, he spoke. The status quo in this world was power, and there were many ways to get it after all. Didn't anyone ever argue that knowledge was power? Izuku brought up exercise routines while he was seated at his computer. I'll be strong not only physically but mentally as well. I'll exhibit Koch-chan. Izuku gave a head shake. It was time for him to sever their alleged friendship. Izuku was only fooled into thinking they were still friends because Katsuki was an arse. I'll demonstrate to Katsuki and All Might that power is arbitrary. So it continued. Izuku trained extremely hard over the summer, lifting weights, running, and spending countless hours studying everything from tactics in martial arts to biology and chemistry. He was particularly interested in how the human body could be developed forcibly, such as by removing the brain's restrictions on the muscles. Izuku gained a lot of muscle, lost his thin frame, and experienced a growth spurt that enabled him to increase from 5 to 5'11". With his untamed green hair chopped into a crew cut, Izuku was hardly recognizable. Izuku discovered accounts of the drug trigger while conducting study. This medication has the ability to maximize a user's peculiarity. Exactly what I need, you said. Izuku commented while performing push-ups and gazing at his laptop. Izuku took a sitting position and then pulled up all the most recent occurrences on a map, giving him a fairly precise search region. Trigger need a dealer, just like any drug. Izuku knocked into his mother, nearly sending her to the floor before he caught hold of her, and pulled her to her feet with one hand. Izuku rose up, shut his laptop, grabbed his jacket and left the room wearing black cargo pants, boots and a grey t-shirt stretched taut over his chest. Inko Midoriya, a big woman, was shocked by the strength his kid now possessed, when she saw him pull her back up onto her feet before she fell. Oh Izuku, are you leaving, then? Inko inquired timidly. Since school finished, she hadn't seen her young son very often. He worked out or read lengthy works on specialized topics alone in his room. When she questioned him how he was able to buy all of his weights, his response astounded her. I sold all of that All Might junk. Izuku had idolized All Might, but now he had sold everything and referred to it as rubbish. It was just one major change after another, and Inko was speechless. His gym routine and haircut came first, then he sold his All Might memorabilia. It saddened her to think about her own child in that way, since it was as though she were living with a stranger. Yes, I'll return later, please do not wait for me. As he slid by her and made for the front door to put on his shoes, he said. Izuku, you understand that I adore you. Looking over her shoulder at her son, she questioned. Izuku briefly halted his movements before putting his shoes on and stood up. Mom, I know, he spoke as he left the house, locking the door behind him without turning around. Izuku traveled far into the city where the most recent trigger incident had taken place. As he did so, he looked through the numerous images the media had gathered in an effort to identify the dealer. It was a long shot, but Izuku had studied human behavior and, although not being an expert, he thought he was capable of spotting something unusual. Izuku observed the devastation in front of him from outside the construction zone. It seems that the trigger incident had caused a sound court to go berserk, sending enormous shockwaves throughout the neighborhood and bringing down a number of structures. Izuku identified something in the film when comparing the photograph to the actual scene. In this day and age, carrying a briefcase is as common as it gets. However, this man carried himself in such a way that when everyone else was fleeing and shouting, he simply stood there and observed. Izuku grins. We found you. Now that he knew who to look for, he remarked, scanning through his photos once more. Mayuri was strolling along the sidewalk, feeling very good about himself. He has almost sold all of his trigger. He had to be careful because if the boss found out he was selling this stuff, he would be turned inside out, so he was going to call it an early night tonight. Of course, his orders were to simply give the item out, but why give when you can sell? The drug would still go out anyhow. When two hands emerged from the shadows and seized Mayuri by the collar, they threw him against the back wall of the alley as he was crossing it. The pressure was sufficient to expel the air from his lungs. Looking up, he saw the big, shadowy figure approaching him and gasped. Mayuri replied by spitting after collecting saliva in his mouth. Mayuri's peculiarity was pretty self-explanatory. She spits acid. He had acidic saliva. The figure dodged the bullet like water before kicking him in the mouth. Mayuri's teeth broke, and blood poured into his mouth. As he strained to scream and inhaled, feeling pieces of tooth slip down his neck, an iron grasp tightened around his throat, lifting him up against the wall. I'm going to say this only once, so pay close attention. You must give me the trigger you currently own, as well as a quarter of every order you receive because I currently own you. If you don't, I'll find you again, and the next time, you'll have more than a few broken teeth to worry about. Drop it in this alley. Now, if you concur, nod your head. Mayuri scowled down at the man, but it was difficult for him to see him well, because of the kick to the jaw and the dim alley, which didn't help matters. This guy was certainly powerful enough to fold him up and put him in his pocket if he felt like it. He would spit at him, but his quirk only worked when he had pure saliva in his mouth. With all the blood in his mouth, his acid wouldn't be more than a little itch. As soon as Mayuri shook his head, he was knocked to the ground. Before pausing and throwing his bag to Mayuri, the man took it and began to open it. In dismay, Mayuri pursed his lips. He would have been completely astonished if he had attempted to pry open the case, but it appears that the brute had a good view of him. Mayuri inserted his finger into the key lock, which then opened after scanning his fingerprint. He instantly handed over the 5 remaining vials. The man put the vials in one of his cargo pants pockets before leaving. Mayuri spat out more pieces of broken teeth while clutching his damaged mouth in agony. I pray I never see that person again, whoever he may be. Strength quirks, fuck. At 3 in the morning, Izuku returned to his house and saw that the living room light was on. He kicked off his shoes and turned around to see his mother sleeping on the couch with the remote on the ground and an infomercial playing. Sighing, he turned off the TV, picked up his mother in bridal form, and then turned out the light. Izuku positioned Inko on her bed and covered her with a blanket. He sighed despite knowing that what he was about to do would severely harm her. He would never be able to complete the necessary tasks if he remained here. Izuku entered his room and started to pack. Taking the money that was left over from the sale of his All Might junk and many outfits, Izuku took one last look around the space before leaving for good. Trigger in hand, he could get started right away. He would demonstrate to the world the true meaning of power. He would be at the very top among both heroes and baddies. He would have unquestionable power. After leaving his mother 2 months ago, Izuku took a look at the house he had built for himself. A small drug ring had been utilizing this abandoned building on the outskirts of town as their manufacturing facility, but, with a simple call to the police, the gang was either apprehended or dispersed, leaving him with a beautiful location to start up shop. With all the lab equipment the police had stolen, it had been the ideal situation for Izuku to start disassembling the trigger and re-engineering it to serve as a super steroid for himself. Fortunately, Mayuri instantly complied, providing him with a steady stream of trigger to work with, and before he knew it, 2 months had passed. Izuku examined his solution while seated at a workbench in a pair of jeans, boots, and no shirt. He had bags under his eyes as evidence of the effort he had put forth to get here. Izuku wasn't a chemical genius, but he had learned enough since his encounter with All Might to have gotten this far. This seems to be what I'm looking for, he said. Izuku spun the neon green liquid in the vial while grinning. He laid the vial down and squatted to the floor, saying, all that's left is to find a delivery system. He said that exercise typically helped him think. Whether it was push-ups, crunches, or chin-ups, the repeated motions of exercise brought him tranquilly. I could inject it, but that would be unpleasant, and my enemies won't be giving me any opportunities to fire, anyway. Additionally, it's unsafe to have to carry around a variety of needles. The same problems are raised by pills. Izuku rolled onto his back and peered up at the cobweb-covered ceiling, his eyes flitting across it aimlessly before he fixed on the window. Izuku started speaking while sitting up as smoke was drifting by it and giving him an idea. He sprang to his feet and shouted, what if I made something like nicotine patches? While nodding. Okay, let's go to work because a test drive is coming up soon. Like she did every day, Inko Midoriya took a seat in her son's chamber. She had been without her son for 2 whole months. Inko was looking down at a picture of a newborn Izuku, while her eyes were bloodshot, and she had dark bags under her eyes. Her personal miracle and a running joke between her and her spouse, Hisashi, was Izuku. They had been trying to conceive for so long, but nothing was working, and then, just as they were about to give up, she missed her period. The day she learned from her positive pregnancy test had been the best of her life, second only to the day she wed Hisashi. When she first touched Izuku, he was so small that it was difficult to relate him to the guy she had known before he left. Inko was so engrossed in her account of her son that she failed to observe Mitsuki Bakugo enter Izuku's chamber. When her son vanished, Mitsuki turned to look at her best friend or the shell that had replaced her. The fact that both ladies were expecting their first child and that Inko's calm demeanor was the ideal counterbalance to Mitsuki's explosive personality brought Mitsuki and Inko closer together. The two women had been friends ever since Mitsuki moved in with her husband. As Mitsuki and the blonde locked eyes, she remarked, jolting Inko out of her reverie, "Inko, you need to eat something dull." No matter how many times she saw it, and for the previous 2 months, that was every day, the pain on Inko's face hit Mitsuki like a gut strike. Before her son developed into the haughty asshole he is today, Inko had visited her home and inquired about her son's relationship with Katsuki. Inko sobbed on her porch when Mitsuki informed her that Izuku wasn't there. Mitsuki invited her inside to hear Inko's account of how Izuku underwent a terrifying transformation over the course of the summer, before ultimately going missing one night 2 months ago. Every day that passed, Inko fell deeper and deeper into sadness, to the point that Mitsuki had to call Hisashi and explain what had happened. Inko had already phoned the police to report her son's absence, but they had not yet found anything. He was meant to arrive any day now, but due to job obligations, he was unable to help his wife right away. Sincerely, Mitsuki was baffled as to why a man would refuse to comfort his wife about their missing child, because it was so terribly vital. As she helped Inko to her feet, Mitsuki noticed how her pink jumper and trousers draped loosely over her elongating body and shook her head. Mitsuki remarked, forcing a smile on her lips, "Come on Inko, let's get you something to eat." As Inko limped after her into the kitchen and sat at the table, Mitsuki prepared her a basic meal, knowing it would be difficult to get her to eat anything. After putting together a sandwich, Mitsuki went back to the table and placed the sandwich in front of Inko, along with a glass of water. Inko continued to ponder the infant photo of Izuku without saying anything. Mitsuki sighed and sat down, getting ready for the conflict in front of her. "Inko, darling, you know you're my best friend, and I only want what's best for you, right? You need help, Inko, this isn't healthy, you seldom eat, and based on the bags under your eyes, I can tell you aren't getting enough sleep. You can't punish yourself for this, it's not your fault." Inko said, "Yes it is." As she rose up and glared down at Mitsuki while slamming her hands on the table. Inko slouched back into her chair. "This is my fault. I gave up on him, Mitsuki. He asked me, and I didn't know what to say, so I just said I'm sorry, thinking that would help him get through it. I didn't have the heart to say no, but I also didn't have the courage to say yes, and that's why he left. He quit on me like I quit on him." Inko looked down at the picture of her son as tears streamed down her face. Regarding what Inko was saying, Mitsuki was perplexed. No mother, even her own, was more encouraging in her eyes than Inko's. Mitsuki wondered what inquiry could have resulted in the level of remorse Inko was currently experiencing. "What did he ask you, Inko?" Mitsuki asked. The query that each child has for Mitsuki is, could he be a hero? No, Katsuki Bakugo was not anxiously searching for Izuku Midoriya as he walked along the street aimlessly without really having any particular destination in mind. That'd be foolish. The idea of Deku and the last thing he'd said to him before he vanished caused Katsuki to kick a rock off the sidewalk as he went. That fucking loser, what does he think he's doing making his mom cry like that? The next time I see Deku I'm going to crack his face in half. Oh shit, what if he did, Katsuki thought as he imagined Izuku's body slamming into the ground. Here's how you can get a court, Deku. Pray to have one in your next life and jump off the school. He grumbled and started to rush towards the school. No, Deku would never do something stupid like that. I was such a jerk to Izuku. Why was that? As Katsuki pursued the same solution in an endless cycle, that notion kept playing over and over in his mind. Izuku was better than me even without a quirk, and if he had one, he would be in a league of his own. No one would even know if Izuku was laying dead around here if Katsuki hopped the fence of his school, which was closed for the summer. So why didn't he feel relieved after searching for Izuku's body for so long and so diligently? Knowing that his pal was somewhere out there made him feel even worse. As the sun began to set on his agony, Katsuki repeated, "What am I saying? I was no friend to Izuku, I was just his bully. A jealous asshole that picked on him, making his life a living hell. I am sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry." Izuku entered a clothing establishment that specialized in producing attire for people with heteromorphic flaws. He made his way to the back of the store, close to the changing rooms, where 2 security guards were waiting. He was wearing a blue t-shirt, jeans, his boots, and a baseball cap pulled low over his head. They both moved aside as Izuku approached, knocking on one of the stalls 3 times fast, followed by 2 seconds of silence, and then 3 more times. The blue door opened to expose a stairway that Izuku descended, leading to a door that was open from the inside to reveal a sizable office. The room was tastefully decorated, with 2 couches on the left and right of a massive oak desk at the back. Izuku turned to face the man at the counter. His most noticeable characteristic, though, was that he was a humanoid cat. He was dressed in a black suit with a golden tie. His eyes were green, just like Izuku's, and his fur was striped with light and dark orange hues. This man was the proprietor of the business above, as well as the broker for the underworld known as Fat Cat. Given his peculiarity and the fact that this cat had never skipped a meal, the moniker was appropriate. Izuku had been going by the name Im, utilizing his initials as an alias given the circles he currently ran in. Im, it's good to see you. A week or two after leaving his mother's house, Izuku had first encountered Fat Cat. The criminal who had stolen a sizable chunk of Fat Cat's money was living among him. He obviously couldn't let this happen, so he ordered a hit on his former employee, but no one could seem to track down the target. That all changed when Izuku brought him on board, and they've been getting along professionally ever since. Izuku answered, getting down to the point, I need a fight, Fat Cat. Since they were business partners, there was no need to strike up a conversation, and Izuku was still working on perfecting his American accent, which would have added another layer to his disguise. People were more likely to make mistakes if he gave the impression that he didn't speak Japanese. If someone were to describe him, they would undoubtedly think he was an American, rather than a native of Japan. Fat Cat had been attempting to convince him to participate in fights in his events, ever since they first met, following Im's rejection of the chance to work for him. Well, it's about time. Here I thought you'd never say yes to a fight. The man was a mystery. All he had sought was the reward for the thief. In reality, this was only his second encounter with the man in person. Phone calls had been used for everything else. Izuku nodded before turning on his heel and leaving. Your luck actually, Im. I have an event set up at the docks tonight. Head to the docks at 10 o'clock. I'll send you the warehouse number at 9. Wouldn't want this getting out. Not that I suspect you of being a snitch, but one can never be too careful, can he? He had to get ready because tonight would be his steroids' first test run. Izuku checked his watch. It showed 9:45. The text informing him that it was Warehouse 18, the very warehouse he was currently outside of, had arrived just as Fat Cat had said it would, yet there was no sound other than the sound of the waves lapping. As he approached the warehouse entrance and asked someone to open it for him, the sounds of a sizable throng within was released. He arched an eyebrow. Clearly, the building had excellent soundproofing. Izuku entered the room to see the applauding throng gathered around a raised concrete arena where two women were engaged in combat, and he raised his gym bag higher on his shoulder. An African-American woman with thick black dreadlocks that reached the small of her back stood at one end of the arena. She wore a striped black and blue tank top with matching shorts and gray trainers. She formed two enormous fists out of her dreadlocks as she stood there and threw them at the other person. Izuku mistook her opponent's clothing for some sort of opaque cloak, before being launched into the air and away from the hands that were groping her. A yellow bomber jacket was layered over black and yellow striped tights by the girl. Before soaring straight into the ceiling and narrowly avoiding her opponent's grasping hands, Wings flew through the air, her opponent chasing after her the entire time. When Wings kicked off the ceiling and dove straight down, she planted both of her feet in Dread's face, knocking her to the ground with a loud crunching sound. Izuku turned away from the spectacle as he saw Fat Cat approaching him. Izuku followed silently, listening to the broker say, I'm glad you could make it, come with me, I'll show you to the changing room and explain the rules on the way. He grinned as they entered the changing room. Well, rules are simple. Quirks are allowed as much as you like, but no weapons like knives or guns, unless you know that's your quirk. Also no support gear, we're here for quirks not tech, that's another show. He replied, turning to face him, got your own room too since you're new and all. He held out his hand and said, gotta check the bag in. Fat Cat opened it and examined Izuku's equipment as he held it out to him. He remarked, winking and clicking his tongue as he went out, locking the door behind him. Yeah, this works. Now get ready. With the way things are going, your fight will be up soon. I'm betting on you, and don't worry, you'll get that smoking habit. Izuku remarked, tossing his bag on the bench and removing his hood to expose a black muscle shirt underneath, along with his typical pair of cargo pants and boots. Izuku took out a mask resembling those worn by wrestlers by reaching into his luggage. It was a full face mask without a hole for the mouth, with the exception of the white face and green one-sided lenses covering the eyes. The last item of his equipment was a pair of fingerless gloves with steel-reinforced knuckles. He put them on and slammed his fists together, filling the space with the sound of clashing metal. He pulled out a nicotine box and added, now for the most important part. However, the patches inside were Izuku's own creation. He took one out, lifted his shirt, placed it directly over his heart, and then slammed it into place to open the seal. Izuku initially thought he might have made a mistake because nothing happened, but then he felt a burning sensation in his chest as the medicine started to operate, coursing through his body like acid. Izuku felt his muscles expand under his skin, almost to the point of tearing through it, as he knelt over the wooden bench and gripped the sides, but it ceased as soon as it had begun. Izuku let go of the bench after realizing that he had torn pieces out of it with his fingers. When he turned to face the mirror and saw himself, he realized that he had changed from the person who had just entered the room. He stood over 6 feet tall, at least several inches taller. His muscles bulged with every motion, pressing against his veins, which gave off a faint green glow. He yelled when someone knocked on the door. It worked. I did it. Through the door, someone cried, "You're up, man." To the cheers of the crowd, Izuku exited by slamming the doorknob in his hand. Death Arms finished his hero worksheet and got up from his agency desk, extinguishing his cigarette as he proceeded to the door. He was now going home. Before one of his sidekicks threw open the door, he strained to reach for the knob. His sidekick, a young man with similar black and yellow armbands like himself and wearing a blue shirt and trousers, yelled, "Death Arms sir, we have fresh intel in." Death Arms moaned in response to this change. "I suppose heroes don't require sleep." He had an inside thought. Before his sidekick informed him of the nature of the intel, he added, "If it's not something big, let someone else handle it." He was about to leave. Death Arms turned, grabbed the paper and saying, "Sir, it's Fat Cat." Some would say that Fat Cat was Death Arms' white whale. He had been attempting to capture that Kraton for years, but the odds weren't in his favor because he was as cunning as he was large. Death Arms said, "Get everyone to the docks. I'm finally going to skin that cat tonight." As his sidekick took off to gather everyone, Death Arms replied, peering out his window at the docks, "You've gotten your last slice of lasagna, Garfield." Izuku entered the ring facing his opponent, a man who appeared to have a bull quirk, with big horns facing forward and hooves in place of feet. Even his huge nose ring matched his theme. To begin the battle, the announcer entered the ring. The crowd went wild when the announcer said, "Crooks and criminals, I present to you another glorious fight. On the left we have returning fighter Black Bull." It was clear that he was the favorite to win. The majority of the audience booed when Izuku said, "And on the right we have mysterious newcomer Im." But Izuku didn't care. This was just his testing ground, and once he had what he wanted, he wouldn't return. "Alright, start the fight now." Bull wasted no time in charging his opponent and attempting to horn him. Izuku adopted a stance, placing his left foot in front and his right foot behind him in preparation for the blow. Bull said, "I'm going to mow you down, boy." Just before colliding with Izuku, Izuku seized the bull's horns as they came into contact. He lifted Bull off his feet and then brought him down in a full frontal body slam, which shocked him with how little force he actually felt. He felt as airy as a bird. "This is it, this is how my power feels. I created this ability with my own two hands." Izuku attempted to stand up while gazing down at Bull's prone figure. Izuku raised his foot and slammed it against the back of Bull's skull, crushing it firmly into the ground. "I want more, I'm not done yet." Izuku paused as he bent down to grasp the bull by the horns, only to repeatedly slam his knee into the animal's face, as the bull's face buckled with the weight of the hits, causing the black bull to slide across the arena and out of sight. As the front of the warehouse was blasted in, the crowd fell silent in response to the violent display they had just witnessed. Izuku focused on Fat Cat making a break for it, and decided running away would be for the best, because he wasn't sure how long his drug would last, and he wasn't ready for the pros to find out about him yet. He took off quickly, catching up to Fat Cat, his enhanced muscles propelling him with ease. Fat Cat was in the locker room trying to scurry through a window that was open, but it was blocked by the heroes. "Death Arms wants to harm me. I'll give you whatever you want if you can get me out. Whatever, money, ladies, and drugs. I'll obtain it." Izuku grabbed his bag and muttered, "Stand back." Before cocking his fist back and breaking a massive hole in the wall that both fled through, even if he didn't really want to help Fat Cat, and couldn't pass up the chance to hang it dead around his neck. As soon as Death Arms and the broker both noticed Fat Cat, they both fled, followed by a masked bad guy, shouting, "Take care of these men, I'm going after Fat Cat. If they get in there I'll never find them." He shouted, barreling through the low-level thugs as he chased Fat Cat. Hearing a loud crash in the back room, Death Arms kicked in the door and noticed a large hole there, probably made by the masked man who'd been following Fat Cat. Death Arms jumped through the hole into the cold night, and saw two figures running towards a maze of shipping containers. The pro yelled, grabbing a locker from the dressing area, tossing it into the air as he raced, seeing it fall in front of the fleeing pair. As the locker threatened to crush him, Fat Cat yowled in terror, "That bastard nearly killed me." When he turned back, Izuku's bag was flung in his face. He calmly turned back to face Death Arms, saying, "I'll hold him here, take that, and get out of here." Fat Cat didn't need to be reminded twice. He rushed away on all fours with the sack on his back, just as Death Arms arrived. "I have sympathy for bad guys like you. This is your one opportunity, surrender," Death Arms remarked while cracking his knuckles. "You have such loyalty to rubbish." Izuku didn't have time to listen to this hero. He was on a time limit that could expire at any moment. Therefore, he pressed the attack while using what he knew about Death Arms to his advantage. Death Arms narrowly avoided a fist to his face, feeling his cheek split open as he dodged to the side, driving a fist into the villain's side, feeling as if he just punched steel. Death Arms yelled in pain as he threw a Hail Mary right hook, catching Izuku on the right side of the head and smashing in the lens of his mask. Izuku stepped in close, not giving Death Arms any breathing room. He knew that a few years ago Death Arms had broken his left leg, catching some fallen debris. The pro fell to his side and looked at his broken limb, as Izuku stepped back, feeling the plastic cut at the edge of his eyelid and brow. He pulled the lens from his mask to reveal his bloodied green eye, which to Death Arms appeared to glow in the darkness. The pro went to yell in pain, but Izuku stomped on his hand, shattering the bones there, and he went to reach for the radio on his belt, only to have Izuku's fist crash. The strong always get their right due in this world. You death arms are neither just nor powerful, only the powerful are. I was poisoned by your hypocritical venom to make me the bane of your hero society, but it didn't kill me as you had hoped. No, I spit that poison at you all. It flows through my veins and gives me power that none of you can fathom. Izuku kicked the pro in the side, rolling him onto his stomach, then grabbed his arms from behind, stepping on his back, pulling with all his strength until he felt both arms dislocate. By this time, Death Arms was succumbing to the pain of his wounds, his world swimming in and out of focus. Unbeknownst to Izuku, Fat Cat had been lurking in the shadows watching the fight, actually recording it, mostly for leverage on him, but now he knew what to do with it. He'd upload Death Arms defeat. Fat Cat knew when an opportunity was at hand, and this was it. Green steam began to emanate from Izuku's body, shrinking him as his muscles returned to normal. When Death Arms' sidekicks arrived at the scene of the battle, they were horrified by what they saw. Death Arms was pinned to a shipping container, and the metal of the container tore out and punctured through the hero's once proud arms twice over, from which he hung limply like he'd been crucified. His arms were a collage of bruises, as if someone had repeatedly smashed them. His face was an unrecognizable mess. Death weapons rang out all night long. The TV featuring a female news anchor with 3 eyes and purple hair was playing in the corner of an underground pub. On the screen showed a photo of the villain. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We come to you today from NHA News Studio. It has been a month since the brutal attack on pro-hero Death Arms by the new villain named Bane. Authorities and heroes are still following this scoundrel, but no arrests have been made as of yet. One of the 2 people inside the pub muted the TV. One was perched behind the counter studying a laptop. The villain's name was Kurogiri, and his main distinguishing feature was a pair of burning yellow eyes that seemed to be a living cloud of darkness. Kurogiri's fingers moved like ghosts across the keyboard in front of him, while he was wearing a server's vest and neck armor. He heard a voice coming from the lone other occupant's direction as he was working. He sighed quietly since he had been listening to the same speech for a month, and was able to recite it both forward and backward from memory. The only justice in this world is that of the powerful, and you Death Arms are neither. I am the bane of your hypocritical society. You made me by poisoning me with your hypocritical venom, but it didn't kill me like all of you wanted it to. Instead, I used that venom you all spat at me. It's coursing through my veins and makes me more powerful than any of you can imagine. Bane started to humiliate Death Arms as there was laughter. Tomura Shigaraki chuckled more as he viewed the video and exclaimed, "He's incredible Kurogiri, I want to meet him." Tomura had light blue hair, crimson eyes, and scars on his right eyelid, and the left side of his severely chapped lips. He was dressed in trousers, a black long-sleeve shirt and red trainers. As the same query that had been posed to him numerous times over the previous month was raised, Kurogiri rolled his eyes. "Kurogiri, haven't you discovered him yet?" Tomura yelled. As Kurogiri heard Tomura Shigaraki's nails rake across the dry skin of his neck, he said, "Calm down, Tomura Shigaraki. This is a complicated task finding someone by a single video. It will take more time." He's losing interest in the video, which will eventually trigger a violent outburst. Kurogiri contemplated before returning to the computer and accepting that he would need to order new furniture for the bar. He had been searching dark web chat forums for information about this Bane guy for the past month without success. On Kurogiri's screen, a message in encrypted form appeared. He took a few seconds to decipher it and read the little message it held. "What makes you want to find Bane, and who are you?" In the midst of hearing Bane's remarks play again in the background, Kurogiri took a time to type down a note. "My boss wants to meet with Bane, and I am Kurogiri of the League of Villains. How can I verify your legitimacy?" The unidentified messenger responded. Kurogiri scowled at the display. Since there was no insurance in this line of work, criminals were understandably anxious, but it was a headache to deal with. Kurogiri would prefer to bypass all of this pointless crap, but he will have to participate in the game for the time being. "What would you like me to do to convince you?" Kurogiri replied, his fist clamped over the keyboard. "I'll give Bane your location if you send it to me." When asked to entirely expose Tomura and himself, Kurogiri snarled in annoyance. Without the consent of the master, he was unable to accomplish it. Kurogiri was unaware that Tomura had followed him and was listening in on their conversation. Kurogiri was undecided, but Tomura took advantage of it to reach around him, type their address, and send it before Kurogiri could intervene. Kurogiri's skull erupted in a haze of fury. As Kurogiri yelled, another message came through. It contained 4 short words. "Why did you do that? You've completely exposed us to whoever this is. It could be the police assembling a strike team right now. We'll get back to you." The chat box was completely deleted, and the connection was broken. Tomura grinned broadly. "See, now we'll get to meet Bane." Kurogiri considered throwing Tomura into the water, but he restrained himself. Despite the fact that Tomura was way too childish for his age, he couldn't harm him because he was crucial to his master. To relieve his stress, Kurogiri said, "For our sake, I hope you're right, Tomura Shigaraki." He then went in search of a glass to clean. Fat Cat tucked his paws behind his head and reclined back from the computer on his desk. He pulled his work phone out of his desk's drawer and remarked to his empty office, "League of Villains, hun. His contacts from the underworld were all on this phone, with Bane at the top of the list. Fat Cat called Bane's number and said, "Well, it couldn't hurt I suppose, and it's really up to him if he shows or not. No skin off my bones if he doesn't." Izuku was performing chin-ups at home while wearing 2 100-pound weights on a chain around his waist. After aiding in his escape, Fat Cat had truly kept his promise. He had intended to kill the broker for exposing him to the public before he was ready when he learned about the video Fat Cat had uploaded about him the following day. But in the week it had taken Fat Cat to get in touch with him, he had grown to appreciate the broker's unjustified help. The villains worshipped Bane, and the populace was terrified of him, but the heroes were most terrified of all. Every hero he encountered on the street or during their TV appearances could see it in their eyes, and that was what made it all worthwhile. Therefore, he was pleased to let the broker live when Fat Cat called and said that he had lined up a location for Bane. It was a modest house next to Dagoba Beach that Fat Cat had purchased for a great deal, because it practically overlooked a dump, which also meant that there was very little chance of anyone coming out here, given the amount of garbage that was accumulating every day. Fat Cat's men had personally renovated it. Good furnishings and all the creature comforts one could desire were good to have, but Izuku didn't need them. All he really needed was a place to sleep, a fridge, a place to work out, and a lab to mix his venom, as he was now referring to it. For the last month, he had been reworking venom to make it more potent, and testing its new limitations with the lab materials he had transported from his previous residence. Izuku can currently only take 3 doses at once before he loses all ability to think clearly. Venom also helps him heal more quickly and makes him more resistant to injury, neither of which are particularly remarkable effects, but as long as venom is flowing through him, he won't have to worry too much about getting hurt. When Izuku's phone rang while he was working out, he loudly dropped to the ground, undid the weights and let them fall to the ground. As he wiped the sheen of perspiration from his body, he picked up his phone and put it on speaker. As he grabbed for a sizable water bottle lying on the floor, he questioned, "What is a Fat Cat?" While seated on his bed. The phone speaker loudly and clearly reproduced Fat Cat's speech. "I received a call from a man named Kurogiri from a group going by the name of the League of Villains, who claims his boss wants to meet you," the man said. Izuku got out of bed by stumbling and said, "Why?" before beginning to push-ups. He stated as Izuku's phone buzzed, telling him he had a text. "Didn't ask, sorry about that, figured I'd pass on the invitation to you." Izuku grunted at that and hopped to his feet to see what the address is. "I just sent over the address of where they want to meet. Place is called the Mahjong Bar. I'm sure this isn't a trap or anything. I've had some of my guys scope out the area before calling you, and they'll be nearby just in case shit goes sideways." Izuku hung up the phone after giving the situation some thought and replied, "Alright, I'll think it over." Izuku had been mulling over the idea of forming an organization to support him for a while. After all, heroes have sidekicks, so why not have one as well? This League of Villains seems to have a sizable number of warm bodies for him to choose from. As he put on his boots, jeans, t-shirt, hat, and sunglasses before walking out the door and locking it behind him, he asked himself, what could it hurt? Izuku started his journey towards the city in search of the train station, when he spotted a banner for a missing individual on a nearby light pole. As he approached it, he was confronted by an old photo of himself. He took one look at the shy, embarrassed child he had once been before turning away. Ripping it down would have just made himself the center of attention. "I've evolved, and I'm no longer the helpless youngster I once was." Izuku started moving more quickly because he thought his older self was staring into his back. He could leave behind that grating sensation only once he boarded the train. It had only taken Izuku a little while to reach the bar after getting off the train, down the stairs, and open the door. Both All Might and Kamui Woods were standing outside a hospital room. While Kamui Woods was decked out in full hero garb, the other Mights were each sporting a pair of green trousers and a black t-shirt. The two were peering inside a Death Arms, who was still recovering, trying to lift a barbell. From the side, they could see that the individual weights tallied up to 600 pounds, making the total weight 12,000. Two of the hospital's strongest orderlies were standing next to Death Arms as he sat on the bench and started to lift the barbell. The two experts watched as Death Arms wilted under the strain until, at last, he needed help from the two orderlies to set it back on its rest. A little over 1,000 pounds should have been nothing to the punching hero, so it was truly pathetic. In the past, he had no trouble lifting that with one hand. All Might clenched his hands and turned to face the Kamui trees. The Recovery Girl stepped out of an adjacent room and approached the other two heroes, saying, "The diagnosis is not good." Recovery Girl paused for a moment before continuing. Death Arms suffered severe damage to his arms. Shattered bones are one thing, but having two jagged pieces of metal rammed through them didn't help. Even with my quirk helping him, he'll still need at least another 2 weeks of bed rest. Stones dropped in Kamui and All Might's stomachs. He has permanent damage to his arms, so much so that I'd say his strength has been reduced by at least half. Death Arms' strength was his main selling point as a hero. If it were to be significantly diminished, there would be no way for him to continue being a hero, at least not in the same way. The Recovery Girl said what the other two heroes couldn't or wouldn't. "You both know what that means, which is why I suggested the Death Arms retire." All Might was quite startled by Kamui Wood's yell. How could you say that? Kamui Woods and Death Arms had been close friends for a long time. They both appeared on the hero scene around the same time, and worked on several cases together. They were more than just co-workers, they were true friends, and the thought that his friend might not be able to continue his work was too much for him to bear. In that room is a hero, one of the finest heroes I've had the pleasure to know and work with, he exclaimed. You go in there and tell him to just give up. He's already in pain from having lost to a villain and had it broadcast all over the world. All Might placed a hand on his shoulder and said, Kamui, please remember this is a hospital. As Kamui turned to face him, All Might remarked, besides, she might be right. Speaking as he emerged from the stairwell wearing his signature scarf and superhero costume, Eraserhead said, what if Death Arms goes back out there with his strength compromised, and tries to catch something that's just too heavy for him? He could hurt himself or jeopardize a rescue. It's not fair, but that's the reality of it. Thinking otherwise would be irrational. As he stood before Eraserhead, All Might released Kamui Woods. As Kamui Woods entered the hospital room to speak with Death Arms, All Might questioned Aizawa. Aizawa, were you able to find out any information about Bane? Aizawa gave a headshake. Aizawa scratched his head before Recovery Girl coughed lightly. I was out there all night. I busted up 3 more fight clubs and a villain hideout, but nobody had any info on Bane. He's completely new to the scene. The only thing I know for sure is that he deals exclusively with Fat Cat, and nobody is rolling on the feline. I do have some good news, though. One of the baddies that Death Arms sidekicks captured was brought into this hospital for medical attention. He's on the floor below us, a man named Tyson Ushi, but he went by Black Bull in the Fight Club. He actually fought Bane, and he is a regular at this fight club that is said to be hosted by Fat Cat, so maybe he can give us the answers we need. Coming out of the Death Arms room and moving towards the lift, Kamui Woods stated, then let's go, I have some questions for him. The 3 professionals debated whether it was wise to allow Kamui Woods to speak with the criminal, but none had any legal justification for doing so. The Recovery Girl entered the room, her cane clacking against the tile, saying, you 3 go ahead, I'll do some last-minute work on Death Arms before heading back to UA. After Kamui entered the lift, All Might and Eraserhead followed suit. They rode it down 1 floor before exiting, and saw 2 policemen outside a room that was clearly marked as Black Bulls. All Might remarked to the 2 cops who immediately agreed and started walking down the hall. Why don't you 2 go stretch your legs, gentlemen? We'd like a moment with the villain. Tyson was sitting on the edge of the bed when Kamui Woods opened the door and looked at him. His face was still damaged, but it had improved significantly from when he had first entered. His remaining horns were no longer the angular stumps they once were. Looking at the 3 professionals, he growled, what the fuck do you want? Tyson laughed at Kamui's yelling, I'm going to say this only once. What do you know about Bane? Tell me. Kamui's arm shot out in the shape of branches, slamming Tyson against the back wall of the hospital room while yelling, suck my dick hero, I ain't no snitch. Besides, shouldn't you guys be writing get well notes to the cripple upstairs? Kamui's arm became limp as he was severed from his quirk, and then restrained by Aizawa's scarf. That man upstairs is more than you will ever be, you garbage villain. Now tell me about Bane, or else I'll kill. Aizawa threw Kamui into All Might's firm grasp and stated, you just blew your chance, Woods. All Might, make yourself useful and get him out of here. As he was being taken out, Kamui screamed, you can't do this, Aizawa. Let me go, All Might. While he was still in the hero's clutches, Aizawa closed the door as the 2 pros argued outside. Forgive me, Kamui Woods, I cannot. Sometimes we heroes have to save people from themselves. Before driving his knee into the stomach, Tyson wrapped Aizawa's scarf around him and yelled, that bastard could have killed me. I'll fucking sue his ass. Tell me what you know or I'll start breaking bones, Tyson. Listen here, Tyson. I stopped Kamui from ripping you in half because he has a face in the public, but me on the other hand, I'm nobody. It's not much to me if I get reprimanded for roughing up a villain. Aizawa left the hospital room after realizing that only All Might was left, and that Kamui Woods had left. All Might was not grinning. Aizawa murmured, what did he say, Aizawa? As he rubbed his chin scruff. Nothing much, he really didn't know anything, but what worries me is what he did say. He told me that even if he did know who or where Bane was, he wouldn't say anything, which is odd after all. Bane beat him to hell and back. Why protect someone like that? All Might was also perplexed because it was natural to want to harm someone who had injured you. He asked Aizawa, who shook his head, you think he's scared of Bane or maybe Fat Cat? All Might shivered as a chill ran down his spine. Nope, this is pure loyalty. He said he owes Bane one for taking down a pro the way he did. If he wasn't going to jail, he'd have gone to join Bane. This is dangerous. If he can inspire this kind of loyalty from someone he's savaged, imagine what he'll do to those who have no bias against him. It's exactly how he began. All Might had this internal idea. Aizawa stated, moving to the lift with All Might, anyway we need to get to UA, those irrational entrance exams will be starting soon. Izuku entered the establishment and observed 2 men, one seated at the bar and the other standing behind it. They turned to him, or at least he thought they did because one was a gas cloud in the shape of a human. The black cloud questioned, I take it that you are Bane. Izuku entered the pub farther and closed the door behind him. Tamura exclaimed, "You're just a kid." As he stared in disbelief at the youngster with the muscles next to Kurogiri, his lack of facial characteristics provided him with the ideal poker face to conceal his own shock. Izuku remarked, turning to leave on his heel, "If you ask me here to talk about my age, then we're done." Tamura quickly apologized for being impolite and added, "No wait, please stay." All for One grinned on the other side of the camera. Tamura was amused by his apology to the young boy because he was never courteous to anyone but himself. All for One recalled his younger brother giving him that identical look all those years ago and remarked, "He's starstruck." Bane sat down a few chairs away, and Tamura told Kurogiri to serve him whatever beverage he desired. Izuku had honed his American accent during the previous month, easily concealing his Japanese roots, and said, "Water is fine, I don't plan on being here long. Now what do you want with me?" As he started speaking, Kurogiri placed a glass of ice water in front of Bane. There was a slight break in the bar as a spider web of fractures developed on Bane's glass. "Thank you for meeting with us on such short notice, Bane. My associate and I are the founders of the League of Villains, and our goal is to kill All Might." Tamura started to sweat as the atmosphere in the room became oppressively vile. Bane stared down Kurogiri and questioned, "And how do you plan to do that?" Putting the Mist Man on the spot. Bane was silent for a moment as he considered this. "We've learned that All Might will start teaching at UA this semester. After getting specific information from the school, we will arrange an attack with our followers and kill the symbol of peace, while also blackening the eye of the most famous hero school in all of Japan. All Might, this might be my chance to finally disprove that hypocrite, but in the long run, having my name associated with this League of Villains might prove problematic." Izuku suddenly recalled his old friend Katsuki, who had desired to attend UA. Izuku grinned as he stood up and let go of the glass. Looking at the screen in the rear of the room, he remarked, "I will join you." The speaker crackled, and he added, "But I'm no underling, understand, Mystery Man?" All for One said, "Very well, Bane, I thank you for helping young Tamura." Izuku took out a pen from his pocket and wrote his phone number across the torn All Might poster. Izuku walked out of the pub, pulled out his phone and called Fat Cat, saying, "When you're ready." Izuku said as soon as he heard purring at the other end, "When's my gear going to be ready?" Izuku rolled his eyes as he hung up the phone and got into the waiting car. He saw the suitcase on the back seat and opened it, smiling as he looked at what was there. "I take it the meeting went well." "I figured it would, and don't worry, your gear is in the car waiting for you, just finished it actually. Didn't I tell you that I'd handle everything? A little trust goes a long way, Bane." "Perfect." Since that day at school, Bakugo has worked hard to change. Instead of being the boy bursting with pride, he has driven everyone away and focused solely on his dream of becoming a hero. However, unlike before, he wasn't aiming to be the best for himself. Rather, he was aiming to be the kind of hero Izuku had dreamed of being. He aspired to be a better version of himself, and he thought that if he put some effort into becoming the hero Izuku envisioned, his friend may return and, just maybe, forgive him. He had attempted to ignore everyone while doing this with his new classmates at UA, but there was one individual he simply couldn't ignore. It physically killed him to be around her because she reminded him so much of the buddy he had lost, but he pushed himself to be there in order to protect and befriend her like he ought to have done for Izuku. Her name was Ichako Uraraka. This manly approach gained the attention of Ijiro Kirishima after he witnessed Bakugo threaten to blow Mineta inside out if he caught him staring at Ichako again. His attitude towards the other students in the class was chilly indifference or wrath, but with her he was calm and courteous. The vice class representative Tenya Iida, who criticized Bakugo's tactics but could not dispute the outcomes of his treatment of Mineta, also attracted attention to this same incident. The other females in the class still had to deal with the perverted grape, while Ichako had a night within a week to protect her and keep Mineta at bay. This caused some envy among the other females in the class. As Class 1 entered the USJ building wearing their superhero costumes, Bakugo marveled at the massive disaster scenes all around them. "This crap is what Izuku would have adored." Bakugo observed his sad expression. Ichako hadn't really been attracted to Bakugo because she thought he was a little too over the top, but the look of pain on his face whenever he looked at her made her want to find out why and comfort him. As a result, she allowed him to protect her, even though she didn't feel the need for it, because it seemed to make him happier. As 13 spoke about the strength of her quirk, she turned her attention to Bakugo, and noticed the same agonizing expression on his face. Then, Aizawa jerked to attention as he peered out onto the pitch and noticed a portal open. Kirishima began to say, "Is the simulation already underway?" "I thought this was rescue practice," but Aizawa interrupted him. As soon as Aizawa put his goggles on, he shouted, "Stay back. These are real villains." Aizawa remarked as he ran down the steps and started fighting the villains below. 13 Protect the students. Kaminari tried to get a signal out to the main building. Kaminari said, sweat trickling down his cheeks, "Shit, I can't get through something or someone is jamming my signal." 13 was cut off by Kurogiri, who stepped in front of the pupils and blocked the entryway. "Get to the door now, students aisle." As Kurogiri spoke, Bakugo and Kirishima charged at him, preventing 13 from using her quirk. "Do nothing, 13, unless you want to endanger your students with that black hole of yours." Kurogiri remembered what Bane had told him as he turned to face Bakugo. Kurogiri had been wondering why Bane would ask such a thing. Kurogiri, I don't care where you put me, but if you see a blonde kid with red eyes and explosions coming from his hands, send him to me. Kurogiri had inquired, do you mind if I ask why? Bane just said while glancing at him. We have history, that's all he said, so he followed Bane's instructions and sent Bakugo and the Redeed to him, before escorting the other pupils to other parts of the USJ. With several hundred other villains, Bane perched on a huge cinder block in what he assumed to be a partially wrecked office building. Izuku blinked at the villain addressing him through the one-sided lenses of his mask. So you're Bane. He was wearing his newly updated costume. He wore Kevlar woven trousers, a long-sleeved shirt, bracers on his forearms, upgraded steel knuckle gloves, steel-reinforced knee pads and steel toe boots. The mask that had changed the most was his. It was made of the same Kevlar weave as his shirt and trousers, and it had a metal-breathing mask. Less likely to break and cause him to lose his vision, the lenses were now composed of bulletproof glass. He claimed that his peculiar behavior was caused by his breathing, but in reality, he had actually needed the breather to utilize the new aerosol version of venom. Bane adjusted himself on the block and said, I am. He hadn't yet dosed because he didn't want to do it too soon, and possibly waste one of the three. The villain chuckled as a portal appeared in the ceiling. Give it to me straight, Bane, you're the real leader of this whole league of villains, aren't you? There's no way the hand dude is the boss, he looks like some drug addict. You're the only reason a lot of us came. Man, what you did to Death Arms, that shit was epic. As the other villains gathered around the gateway and two children were thrown into the center of the group like chum into a shark tank, Bane stood up and yelled, Showtime. Izuku moved carefully towards the stairway leading to the lower floor, while loud bangs and explosions could be heard. I want Katsuki for myself, and there's no way Katsuki would get taken out by that cannon fodder. Hopefully those morons will kill the other child. All I have to do is wait and then move. Bakugo and Kirishima unleashed their fury on the criminals, with Kirishima beating them like a battering ram, and Bakugo continuing to detonate those within his grasp, until all the villains lay comatose on the ground. Kirishima stated, letting go of his hardening, we need to get back to our classmates Bakugo. The enemy was left alive but smoldering and unconscious, when Bakugo moved his palm to hold him to the ground and blow him up. Bakugo responded, yeah, you're right, let's go save our classmates, as a hand shot up from the ground and grabbed hold of his foot, dragging him through the first level and into the second, where he met Bane. Although the mask was more sophisticated, Bane's signature design could still be seen on it. As the hold on his foot loosened, Bakugo released an explosion that produced a massive cloud of smoke. He then stared in horror as a fist sprang out of the fog and punched him in the stomach, forcing him to vomit as he flew back and crashed into a wall. Kirishima had witnessed what had occurred, and had jumped through the hole to assist his friend right away. He witnessed Bakugo cause an explosion, then shoot out of the resulting cloud and crash into a wall. He was so preoccupied with his companion that he didn't see the fist coming until it was too late. He stiffened his arm to block the hit, but was terrified to feel his skin split and bleed, as he was struck to the ground while still barely awake. Due to his lack of strength, Bakugo was unable to warn Kirishima, and instead had to be content to watch his friend suffer injuries. Bakugo exploded at Bane while yelling, don't you hurt my friend. He then threw a stun grenade in Bane's direction before grabbing Kirishima. He hurled Kirishima out the window of the building, exploding him like the ball at his quirk assessment test, yelling, you have to get out of here and go help our class. Bakugo whirled around and glared at Bane, you called that boy your friend. He was alright other than the fact that he had burns all over his body. Katsuki yelled, setting off minor explosions, yeah, he's my friend, you dumbass villain. What, are you deaf? You know, I hoped you'd be here, but at the same time I kind of hoped you weren't, because if you weren't then maybe I'd have more respect for this school, but knowing you're here means that I was right. All anyone cares about is power. Katsuki, Bakugo, you don't have friends, you only have victims and sycophants, the man said. Bakugo charged towards Bane, yelling, you're just some asshole villain, so don't act like you know me. As he prepared to deliver a powerful right hook, he would destroy that mask. Bane hadn't let go of Bakugo and lifted him up again to drive his fist into the side of Katsuki's face, releasing as he did while watching Katsuki sprawl to the ground. As Bakugo hit the ground, the floor cracked under the force of the blow, knocking the air out of him once more. As Katsuki struggled to stand, Bane stated, you always start a fight with a big right hook, Katsuki. Blood splashed onto the ground as it ran down the side of his face. Katsuki's head flew up looking at Bane, this is pathetic, really, you're nothing to be afraid of. I can't believe Izuku was afraid of you. Katsuki stumbled to his feet, what do you know about Izuku Midoriya? He exclaimed. Bane's mask revealed that he was a little startled. It had been a while since Katsuki had addressed him by name, and when he did, it lacked the annoyance with which he had addressed Deku. Instead, it sounded almost as though Katsuki was worried about him. Bane said, and in a way it was true, I killed him months ago. Izuku Midoriya couldn't coexist with Bane, thus in reality Bane had already killed him. Hearing those words made Katsuki's entire body numb. The monster in front of him slaughtered his comrade, the only true friend he had ever known. The blonde gazed at Bane while his eyes were streaming with tears. Bane grins. It would have been unfortunate to travel so far only to learn that you had become the same monster you always were. That's the Katsuki I know, full of hatred and anger. Katsuki pulled down the grip on one of his gauntlets to reveal a pin trigger that he pressed to release a powerful explosive wave that tore off the side of the building. You want a monster? Well, here you go, you bastard, he yelled. Katsuki realized that, although he may have just killed a person, it didn't matter because nothing else did. He would never be forgiven by Izuku. His arm dropped as the ground gave way beneath him, showing Bane leaping up to him from below and grabbing hold of his face as he slammed Bakugo's head against the ceiling and hurled him back to the ground. Bane said as he slammed his foot down on Katsuki's gauntlet, smashing it and sending shards into his arms. That was close. If I hadn't punched through the floor, that would have blown me out of the building. However, the explosion user moved his other gauntlet and repeated the release process with his teeth at close range. Bane yelled as he pounded down on Katsuki's building explosion with all of his might. Always on the offensive. Fine, then let's see whose power is better. Boom. Two explosions that happened at the same time and shook USJ that day marked the end of two catastrophic encounters. Tomura Shigaraki saw his beloved Nomu being launched through the USJ roof by none other than the man they come to kill, All Might, while the impact of Katsuki and Bane's assaults resounded through the USJ. All Might shouted over the pitch towards Tomura and Kurogiri, I really have gotten old. Back in the day it would have taken no more than 5 blows to take down that beast, but today it took more than 100. Since they appeared to be the attack's leaders, All Might didn't have much left, but perhaps he could at least capture one of them. Nevertheless, he didn't want to put his trainees at further risk. Then, he should go after the remaining bad guys after getting these two to go. Tomura yelled angrily, Master lied to me. He's not weaker at all. As he started biting at his neck with his claws, till he felt blood and flesh accumulate under his nails. Nomu was the priceless gift that his master had given him, and All Might had taken it from him while grinning like nothing had happened. Kurogiri said as he went to envelop Tomura in his portal mist, we should retreat Tomura. If All Might is here, reinforcements won't be far behind. Tomura's scratching ceased as he had an idea. He grinned behind his palm and continued, reinforcements, hun. Tomura yelled, peering at Kurogiri between his fingers on his face, Bane, bring him here. I don't care where he is or what he's doing, bring him here now. Kurogiri wanted to escape right away, but upon seeing All Might, he realized that the peace symbol wouldn't allow them leave so easily. Even with his warps, Kurogiri couldn't outrun All Might. They required Nomu or someone similarly skilled. He said, opening a portal to where Bane stood, but instead of seeing the massive man walk through, they watched a blonde child exit the portal. I see your point, Tomura, I will do as you asked. At this, Tomura and Kurogiri's eyes grew wide. One of the pupils who Kurogiri had warped to Bane was there. This youngster defeated Bane, right? Kurogiri and Tomura thought the same thing as All Might's resounding laughter reached their ears. As All Might observed the portal, it was obvious Bakugo wasn't going on his own. Instead he was being carried by Bane, who stepped through after Bakugo. Looks like you underestimated these students, you villains. Young Bakugo here has returned safe. Both of their bodies could now be seen in their entirety, as they had exited the portal completely. With the exception of some deep lacerations, Bakugo's other arm was in relatively good shape. However, his left arm was covered in blood and had gauntlet shards embedded in it. The only portion of Bane's costume left on his left side was the metal bracer, which shone a dull red from the heat it had absorbed. Bane's left side and arm were severely scorched, with the sleeve and most of his shirt being incinerated. The entire room was filled with the smell of burning flesh. Bane looked at the peace sign and said through his mask, All Might, it's so lovely to see you. All Might yelled at the villain, you monster, release my student at once. As he was ready to charge the bad guy and save his pupil. It's true that he wasn't as powerful as he once was, but he still had one for all and the strength of his forefathers within him. However, he had been seriously injured in the fight with Nomu, and without Todoroki's assistance, he would have never been able to escape from the tag team of Kurogiri and Nomu, who had managed to reopen his wound from 5 years earlier. Bane hissed, holding Bakugo in front of him, careful All Might, are you sure you can reach me before I snap his neck? All Might bit his lip, acknowledging that the villain had a point, it wouldn't take much, and who knows, the sheer impact of you hitting me might do it. He was quick, but was he that quick? And even if he was, could he jeopardize his student's safety in that way? In addition, there was the matter of young Todoroki, who might be targeted by the other two villains if he went after Bakugo. Stall for as long as possible. All Might questioned as he shifted his attention from one villain to the next, in case they made a move. Why are you here, Bane? Bane held Bakugo above his head before lowering his body towards his knee. I'm here to break you, All Might, not just physically, but mentally as well. I will break you down, and as you crumble, the rest of the world will fall with you. The first break happens right now. Bane muttered, goodbye Koch-chan. Bane was about to be attacked by All Might when a portal appeared in front of him. Kurogiri may not always be quick enough, but it was obvious where the symbol of peace was going, so he opened a portal directly in front of Bane, deplacing All Might with only a second's delay back at the bottom of the stairs, just as the sound of breaking bones and Katsuki Bakugo's agonized screams resounded through Yusuke. Uraka, Tsuyu, and Mineta watched it all unfold in slow time, while hearing the sound reverberate in their heads from their vantage point on the shipwreck's own shore. Nu. All Might charged at the villain who was threatening his students, but Bakugo's unconscious body struck him instead. The youngster was seized by All Might reflexively, as he tried to avoid jostling him or his hurt back, but this left him vulnerable for Bane to punch him in the side while he was still hurt. Bane used his 2 remaining dosages of venom as he threw Bakugo at All Might, his muscles bulging with superhuman strength, ramming it all into All Might's side. Before getting smacked in the jaw with his head moving to the side, All Might felt his ribs give way as blood spurted from his mouth. Bakugo is getting in the way of my ability to protect myself, but I also can't just throw him aside because the fools have me over a barrel. All I can do is hold out till aid arrives while doing my best to keep the boy safe. As Bane continued his assault, All Might securely encircled Bakugo, holding him against his chest. Bane approached All Might and drove his fist under the hero's chin, as he heard the hero's teeth make a loud clicking noise. All Might took a step back to get some breathing room away from the villain, as he grinned behind his mask, but Bane grabbed hold of his silly hair and pulled him forward into a headbutt, slamming his forehead into All Might's. Blood splattered the ground around the two as Todoroki watched Bane repeatedly strike All Might, each blow placed to deal the most harm. He wouldn't tolerate it. He moved to launch a wall of ice to defend All Might, but had to retreat when a portal almost sucked him into opened up in front of him. Kurogiri said, ratcheting up the suction of his portal in an attempt to distort the ice kid away. This is no place for children, boy. Bane was ecstatic that he could murder All Might right then and there. Tomoura stood and marveled as Bane defeated All Might with ease. He was unable to pull his eyes away from the scene, not even Nomu had defeated All Might by himself. He grinned broadly while having a hand on his face, and then he burst out laughing. Bane felt his bones under his knuckles snap as he pushed his fist into All Might's face. The way he was holding Bakugo prevented him from accessing his wound once more, but this was better since he intended to sabotage the smile he had revered for so long at this precise time. I no longer feel helpless. All Might was brought to his knees by Bane's kick, and the villain then delivered a right hook to the hero's face, sending blood and spit flying into the air and staining the ground. All Might still held Bakugo close to his breast as he fell to the ground. If this continues, he'll kill both of us, and I can hardly preserve my muscle form. All Might mused to himself that he should be ready for the worst. Bane yelled before slamming his knee into the professional's face, sending him sprawling to the ground. That's where you belong. All Might kneel in the face of true power. I'm sorry, Bakugo, but I'm unable to protect you. All Might began to cry as he looked at the comatose youngster in his arms. Above All Might, Bane elevated his boot in the air. Just as Bane was about to call an end to the period of All Might, bullets pummeling him, penetrating his skin but not severely. Goodbye, symbol of peace, Bane yelled. As several heroes waited in the USJ entryway, Bane fell back and turned to face them. As he observed Tomoura's limbs and legs being shot through by the pro-hero snipe, Kurogiri was also compelled to flee. Before being engulfed in Kurogiri's portal and dropped back into the bar, narrowly evading the pull of 13's black hole, Bane hissed, staring down at All Might, and prepared to kill him at all costs. Kurogiri was approached by Bane, who grabbed his neck armor and squeezed. Bane yelled, I had him. You had no right. As Kurogiri's armor's metal started to break apart, Kurogiri wheezed before Bane released him and removed his mask. Tomoura was injured and the pro-heroes had arrived. Our chances of victory were no longer guaranteed. It was best to retreat. The boy's eyes and neck veins were both glowing a faint green, and he was covered in sweat. Bane inhaled deeply and exhaled gently to allow the adrenaline to subside. You're right, he replied in the manner of an apology as a portal opened, allowing entry for a doctor with a bushy mustache. He turned to stare at the bleeding Tomoura. You were wrong, Master. All Might wasn't any weaker. He destroyed my Nomu. If not for Bane, he would have gotten me. Tomoura complained as the doctor checked at his wounds. Bane didn't wait for the doctor to arrive. The bullets hadn't gone much deeper than an inch or so. As he listened to the unidentified league leader, Bane snatched up his bag, undressed from his torn outfit, and dug out his regular clothes. The boss questioned the young man dressed in the background at the bar, as he peered through his camera at the bar. Are you sure, Tomoura? You say he defeated the Nomu, but was stopped by Bane. This young man defied All Might and eluded arrest. I was thinking for one. Suddenly, a black liquid flowed from Bane's mouth, covering him fully and teleporting him to a secret lab. That deserves a reward, I think. As he rose up and glared at the man who had brought him here, Bane coughed. The man's mouth was the sole distinguishing feature of his face, and his upper cranium was covered in scar tissue, with IVs coming from all over his body. I am well for one, and I apologize for the jarring departure, but I decided it would be best for us to meet in person. In his actual form, All Might was lying in one of the hospital beds with the majority of his body bandaged. He was still quite badly hurt despite Recovery Girl's best efforts, but his physical ailments were not the source of his mental anguish. The sound of Bakugo being shattered over the villain's knee was all he ever saw, and it rang in his head. In anger and regret, he tightened his fist. He shouted, tears rolling down his skeletal face, "I'm no hero. I'm nothing." The other students, besides Katsuki Bakugo, are unharmed. Only Kirishima suffered any moderate wounds. All the criminals other than Bane, the Masked Man, and the Warp Gate were all collected by the police, and I'm even told that the creature known as Nomu was recovered in the nearby forest. It may not be much, but you did your best. After all, you managed to save Aizawa from that Nomu creature. All Might sat up and looked at the principal, his blue eyes shining in the corners of his sockets. "They were my students, sir. I should have been there from the beginning. Instead I wasted all my time knocking out common criminals on my way to work, and now young Bakugo is in a hospital bed fighting for his life. I didn't want to believe that I would have to stop being the symbol of peace, but now it's apparent that I am not capable of holding that title anymore." Nezu groaned and nodded. "It's time I go through with the reason I came here, sir." He got up from his chair and walked over to the nurse's station to use the PA. "I figured you would say that, and I know there's no changing your mind, so I won't try." System. Mirio Tagata was in the middle of a lesson, barely able to conceal his excitement for the material being covered, when the school as a whole heard an announcement. Mirio leapt up from his desk. "Will Mirio Tagata report to the nurse's office?" "Yes, I will," Mirio exclaimed as his classmates watched him leave the room in awe. The ISJ event was the same story that night on every news station. On a rooftop next to an electronics store, a man with a red scarf flowing from his neck and several blades adorning his body, observed with interest as his partner, a man with burned scars running across his visible skin in a patchwork pattern, listened half-heartedly. Bane has reemerged after a month's absence in an even more horrifying manner. He attacked UA with a group of criminals under the alias League of Villains, in an effort to assassinate All Might, a recent hire. When a picture of Bane appeared on the television, the man wearing blades grinned. The hero killer rose up and waved a knife at the array of TVs, saying, "You Farta men know how worthy he is. You understand what is wrong with this world. We are all Bane comrades fighting to purge the globe of fake heroes and media hucksters." A naked woman was curled up in the corner of a run-down hotel room, nursing a broken arm while softly sobbing and clutching her garments to her chest. A blond man lying on the bed in a pair of boxers watched the TV and chugged a drink. He said, "The only reason you're still breathing is because you were good lay, but if you keep up with that damn crying, I'll have to change my mind. We don't know the extent of the student's injury, and the student's name wasn't given to us, but our thoughts and prayers go out to them and their family. We still don't know what Bane is after. Is he just here to cause trouble, or do his motivations go deeper? We're told they failed in that aspect, but did severely wound a student before leaving." The blond man stood up, laughing hysterically, displaying his prosthetic eye and scar on the left side of his face. The man grabbed his clothes and changed into a pair of jeans and a burgundy muscle shirt before putting on his boots. He said, "It doesn't matter what he's after, all that matters is that he's doing what he wants and nobody can stop him. That's fucking great, he's the kind of guy I can work with." He pulled out some cash from his pocket and threw it in the direction of the woman, who was still cowering softly in the corner, as he peered over his shoulder at her. Before opening the door and leaving, he added, "Buy yourself something nice, sweetheart." The blonde girl in a back alley bounced away from the businessman's corpse, but she licked the blood off her knife like it was a gourmet lollipop, while wearing an oversized jumper that covered most of her navy blue skirt. She was using her headphones to listen to the news. The blonde girl smiled widely, revealing large canines, as her amber eyes glowed gleefully in the darkness. As she looked at a picture of her crushed Bane covered in the blood of death arms.as, she skipped out into the darkness, she muttered, tucking the photo inside her jumper. The doors at the Goba hospital flew open as a blonde woman dashed inside, throwing her palms down on the desk, while her husband struggled to follow. "Where's Katsuki Bakugo? What room is he in?" shouted his mother Mitsuki Bakugo, who was wearing a black t-shirt, jeans, and heels. Her husband Masaru Bakugo, who was wearing a tan t-shirt, trousers, and grey running shoes, was standing behind his wife, stooped over and gasping for air. "He's in the operating room right now. You can't see him just yet since he's still in surgery," the woman behind the counter informed the frightened woman and her father, after quickly looking up the information. "Listen here, that's my son in there. Tell me everything. Please have a seat, we'll let you know when he's out of surgery." Mitsuki banged her hand on the counter. Hearing the ruckus, UA teacher Midnight went up to the pair. I shouted, shaking off her husband's attempts to calm me down. "I'm sorry, I teach at UA. I can try to fill you in on what happened, but it won't be much because I wasn't there, and the teachers who were are too hurt to speak at the moment," Mitsuki said, glaring at the receptionist. Masaru sighed in relief and bowed in apology, as he left to hear what had happened to his son. Midnight told the couple what she'd learned about the attack, even relaying what had been done to their son by Bane. Midnight looked down in shame. They were supposed to protect these students, and in only a week they had a break-in by the media, which turned out to have been done by the villains to get confidential information, and now one of their students might have been crippled for life. This would not go over well. Mitsuki had always prided herself on being a strong woman, but right now she was a mother worried about her son. She turned into her husband's embrace, crying against his chest. They could see the hero's fatigue even beneath the recovery girl's visor, who had an untidy hairdo and a sweaty forehead. Recovery girl, how's Bakugo? Recovery girl took off her visor to squeeze the bridge of her nose to try and ease some of her fatigue. Midnight called for the parents, who were still gathering themselves. Mitsuki and Misaru both grinned to hear their son would recover from this, but Midnight knew there was more from the way recovery girl was clutching her cane, but there was some damage that even I couldn't fix. He's out of surgery and his spine is intact, so there's no worry of him being paralyzed at least. You must realize that he had numerous shattered vertebrae, exposing raw nerves, and that the movement he endured while being shielded simply served to irritate these nerves. As you may already be aware, the spinal cord acts as the nervous system's highway, allowing the brain to send information to the rest of the body. These messages can take the form of anything, such as moving your arm or toes or even engaging a quirk. The implied meaning of what recovery girl said sent shivers down the spines of both Bakugos. You don't mean? That is not conceivable because Katsuki's perspiration is explosive by nature. Mitsuki replaced her visor and asked, hoping the hero could be mistaken. Recovery girl then sat down on the nearby chair to explain. Recovery girl said, the neural pathways that send that particular impulse to induce the explosions are damaged. We don't know if that's permanent or not, but at this moment Katsuki can no longer activate his quirk for all intents and purposes. Katsuki Bakugo is cureless. The two parents nodded. It's true Katsuki can still sweat, but it's a conscious decision for Katsuki to explode his sweat. It doesn't happen automatically, correct? Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to me, and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-ifs coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination. Goodbye everyone.